Since I was a child, it has been the ultimate dream of mine to be able to make my own shoes. And I have tackled sneakers and I've tackled very simple high heels. But what I really wanted to be able to make was like really crazy boots. And 2 years ago, I got the absolutely incredible opportunity to go to a shoemaking class, more specifically a thigh-high boot making class with Kira Goodey, who is a shoemaker, and I've been a huge fan of her work for many, many years. And this was at the Brooklyn Shoe Space, which is in Brooklyn. And so I went 2 years ago for about a week to make boots. And while I was there, I made these boots. They're hard to get the whole thing in, but they're all the way up to the thigh, and then they have huge platforms. These are the boots that I made in the actual class with Kira. It was an absolutely incredible experience. If you're interested in making your own shoes, I highly recommend doing a class with Kira or just doing a class in general from Brooklyn Shoe Space. They have a lot of really interesting class opportunities, and their studio space is so nice. And Kiko, who's the owner, is like the nicest person ever. So can't recommend them enough. What I like to do when I go to a shoemaking class, or really any class for that matter, I like to come home and I like to take on one of those projects pretty much right away because I don't want the steps and everything to go out of my head. I want to try and do it on my own while I'm at home. So that's exactly what I did. So I went through and designed a whole new idea for a different pair of boots that I'm going to be using the same pattern. I want to, again, use the foundational things like the pattern, the components, all of that, but just recreate something that just uses all those skills again so I don't forget them. So let's dive right into this project and see what we end up coming up with. To get things started, I'm tracing the pattern pieces from my previous boots. I'm not changing the overall style of these, I'm just doing a different design on the outside, so I am free and clear to use these pattern pieces again. Once I made my design plan, which is just a fancy term for just the sketch of what the finished boot will look like, I then laid another piece of paper on top of this and traced that. I'm gonna then use this piece that I'm tracing onto to cut up and make into the actual pattern pieces. And now comes the most stressful part of the pattern making process. I now have to cut apart every single piece, and then I will also have to add seam allowances to these pieces as well. Adding the seam allowances here is a little bit different than how we do seam allowances for clothing. This time around, I only have to add an allowance to a piece of leather that is going underneath a different piece. And the standard seam allowance for any piece of leather that is going underneath another is 8 millimeters. Okay, so now that we have what looks to be like a giant pile of leather noodles here, I need to do the next step, which is skiving. So if you've never worked with leather before, because it's such a thick material, when you stack leather on top of each other, you have to remove some of the thickness of the bottom layer. So you can do that by hand. There's tools that you can use like a skiving knife, or you can use a skiving machine. So I just ordered this, and it just came in. It's gonna be my first time using it. So this has a drum blade on it. So it has a big blade that is like, it looks like a cup almost, and it spins around, and then there's a rock underneath that spins this way. So the blade goes this way, rock goes this way, and the rock pulls the leather through, and it just slices off the very edge of that leather so it's nice and thin. So I don't have to do that for every single edge, but anywhere where it's gonna be overlapping, I need to skive the edge of the piece that goes underneath And then I also need to skive any edges where it's gonna come together. So like the back seam, the front seam also, because it's gonna be lace up, that is gonna be folded over. So because I'm folding it, it'll be too thick if I don't skive it. So that'll be trimmed down also. So first time using this machine. I've used a machine like this before, but this is mine. I own this one. I don't really know how to change the settings on it, so hopefully it's gonna work out okay. It can't be any worse than doing it by hand, which I have done before, and it's terrible. So let's see how it goes. To be honest, this skiving machine is one of the scariest machines that I personally have in my collection. The blade is just so unbelievably sharp, and I honestly wouldn't have considered buying a machine like this if I hadn't already been trained on how to use it with someone who was an expert on the machine. So that being said, it is really awesome and really, really helpful if you work with leather regularly. It just does have a bit of a learning curve. Okay, so now that everything is skived, it's time to stitch everything. So I have all the pieces roughly laid out here. I know this looks like a mess, but trust the process. Before I start stitching these uppers, I'm going to apply a very sticky double-sided tape to the seam allowance. This allows the pieces to really stick together, and that way I don't have to worry about them shifting while I'm sewing. Now that the medial and lateral sides of the boots are sewn, I then need to stitch them together, and this is going to create the back seam. Because the seam is sewn together with a little bit of allowance on either side, similar to how you would have allowance inside of like a shirt or a garment, we can't press these flat. So instead, I'm going to apply a little bit of contact cement right along both sides of that seam. And then I'm going to use a tool to press that seam completely open and flat so it's nice and comfortable when I actually wear these. This middle line right here is where the zipper is actually going to go, and you get to decide where you want that to be. So it's not, it's kind of arbitrary. It's just whatever looks best. I'm trying to avoid cutting into these pieces to put the actual zipper. So I just went up here so that it's only in the white, and then you measure. This is a centimeter this way and a centimeter this way. Measure those out, a centimeter on each side and a centimeter down from the bottom. And that's going to be your actual stitching line. So I'm going to cut, my next step is I'm going to cut this center line just straight down with scissors all the way to the bottom. And this is a tip that Kira gave me. She said use a leather punch and punch a hole at the bottom. This will keep the leather from tearing. So put a little punch there. I'm going to cut that, and then I'll take the zipper. I'm going to put the that really strong double stick tape down both sides. Once I cut this, I'll lay it in there nice so that it covers the zipper, and then I'm just going to stitch all the way around here and all the way back up. Okay, I couldn't even tell you the last time, the clip before this was, like how long ago that was. I'm going to say at least like a year and a half ago. So yeah, these boots, I've just been really stalled on them because I don't know if y'all relate to this, but I definitely have fear-based procrastination where I will just procrastinate something because I'm scared that I'm going to mess up the next step. So yeah, I've just been completely stalled on these because I've been really in my head about lasting them. These are a little bit different because the types of components and things that you need are different than sneaker making, which is predominantly like the types of tools and things that I have. So I was just scared because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And of course, it's so much easier to do this when you have an instructor right there with you if you have a question or whatever. But these have got to be done. And what is kind of ironic is that I took this class originally in May of 2024, and now it is May of 2026, and I'm about to leave to go to New York again. I want to finish these before I leave town. So that's what I'm going to do. And I figured to just get myself over the paralysis of being scared of the next step, because really the thing that's holding me up on this is the lasting. That's the part that I'm most concerned about. I'm going to do things a little bit out of order just to give myself, I just need some quick wins just to remind myself that I know what I'm doing and I can do this. So I'm going to actually start by covering the platforms and the heels. So because the front toe of the shoes is predominantly pink, I'm going to wrap these in pink. The heel will be in red because the back half of the shoe is predominantly red. So these will be red. No more waking up in the middle of the night and being like, oh my God, I really have to finish those boots. I'm just going to finish them. And then I don't have to be awake at night thinking about how they're not done. So let's get going. And then I'll be able to go on my trip with no stress. To apply the leather to the platform, I am going to be using Barge, which is a very strong contact cement, and contact cement does require that you put glue on both pieces that you're wanting to connect together. So I'm going to put a very thin layer of glue onto the leather and then a very thin layer of glue onto the platform. Let that cure for about 5 minutes. Once it's dry to the touch, then I know that I'm ready to actually attach them together. I don't have a pattern for the heel, so I'm going to make one really quickly, and I'm going to do that by laying the heel down flat and then very slowly turning it and tracing along as I turn to get the shape of the heel itself. And then I will need to go in and add a seam allowance on the top and the bottom. And for seam allowance, I'm adding 1 centimeter. As a finishing step for the heel, I need to cut through the 2 layers of leather that are covering the inside of the heel. So I'm using a ruler to make sure that line is nice and straight, and then using a craft blade to cut through both layers of those. And then I will just very gently align both sides so that it gives me a very, very clean seam right down the middle of the heel. To prepare the lining, I am following the same step that I did for the back seam, where I am putting a little bit of glue right along that seam and then using a tool to lay down the seam allowances on either side to make it nice and flat. Because these boots are going to lace up, I need to add grommets, so I'm using a leather punch to make all my holes for the grommets to go into. To be honest, these grommets are not actually the correct ones for this project, but I really didn't want to have to go out and buy more, so I'm just using something that I already had. So I had to kind of make a couple of extra steps here to make sure that the back of the grommets were nice and smooth. So I'm using a tool that I already had to kind of split open the back of the grommet, and then a different tool to flatten it so it's smooth and won't cut my skin. Okay, so there's nothing left to do except to last these shoes, and I'm just gonna do it. I'm not gonna focus on perfection, because no matter what, it'll be a shoe. Now, whether or not it looks perfect, we'll see. But the fact that we're just gonna get to somewhere where there's a wearable shoe is a good thing. But I do have to kind of do a little bit of experimentation because after you last it, or after I last it, I'm going to put in the heel counter, which is a material that goes into the heel to make it rigid so it doesn't collapse when you put your foot in. And then also applying toe puff, which again is a very similar thing that you put on the toe of the shoe so it doesn't collapse when you push it. So when I originally made these shoes in the studio, like with the instructor and everything, they had heel counters that were already molded to the shape of the last. I don't have those. So I have this heel counter material that I believe is heat activated. So first and foremost, I just need to hit this with some heat to first see A, what's going to happen, and then B, the other thing I want to try and figure out is some things that are thermoplastics, like the toe puff, once you heat it, it gets bonded to the material just from the heat. You don't have to glue it on. So I don't know if that will be the same case with this or if I will have to mold it and then glue it. So I'm going to do a little bit of experimentation with this first, and then we're going to dive into the lasting. Come hell or high water, these shoes will be done. I'm leaving town in 3 days. So you've got 3 days to do this. After seeing how the heel counter would react to some heat, I did determine that it's going to stick to whatever I put it onto, so I just set it down for now to cool, and then we know exactly what to do when it's time to put it into the shoe. And now for the big make or break moment. It really is time to just last these, and I'm not going to go into super great detail about lasting because it is a very complex process that's pretty nuanced, and it's really just something that you have to try a few times to get right. But essentially what the goal here is to evenly wrap the leather around the last so that it looks like a shoe. That's the best way I can describe it. And for this first round, I'm only doing the lining and I'm not doing any of the outside of the shoe yet. Once the lining was lasted, I can then go through and put barge underneath the edge, give that about 5 minutes to set, and then use my finger to press down the edges of the lining to make that a permanent last. Before I can last the outside of the shoe, I have to remove all the nails out of the lining and then also use a knife to remove any of the bulky leather pieces underneath the shoe. Next up, I'm adding in the heel counter, and this was a little tricky because, again, this is not really made for this particular type of shoe, so I'm just sort of winging this here, trying the best I can to make sure that it's molded really well to the back of the heel. One tip I would give if you're going to have to do something like this, if you make your own shoes, is that I would try to, in the future, avoid putting the heel counter underneath, because I do have to take all that material away before I can last it, and it was really hard to remove. And after hours and hours of hard work, I am finally able to take the last out. And to finish these off, I'm using regular wood screws to attach the heels. I cannot tell you how relieved I am that after 2 years, this project is finished. And ultimately, I'm sort of glad that it took me so long to finish them, because by the time I circled back around, I've made so many other things. Every single bit of confidence that I earned from those other projects just went into this one. So I think it was almost like a good thing that I waited so long to come back to these, because I don't think I would have been able to do it otherwise. I just needed to get that confidence up before I could tackle this. But then once I started going again, everything was coming back to me, and I was just remembering exactly what I was supposed to do, because that was the other thing, is I was like, I think I know what I'm doing, but it's like, what if I've forgotten everything and I remember nothing? But it was all clicking, and like, yes, these are very different than making sneakers, but it's really like the fundamentals are kind of very similar. So if you can do one, you can do the other. And so that does help that I have that background as well. But I'm so glad that they're done, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. I'm just in awe that I'm 35 now, and I've literally dreamed of making my own shoes since I was a child, like before even high school. So this is like a dream 20 years in the making, and the fact that I have many pairs of shoes that I've made. I have almost a fully handmade wardrobe, like my entire wardrobe. My goal is to either be handmade or thrifted, and I'm pretty much there. It's just surreal. And yeah, so thank y'all for watching these videos. I appreciate that I'm able to share these projects with y'all and someone appreciates them. So if you have questions, comments, any sort of questions about how I learned how to make shoes or how to get started, anything like that, I'm happy to answer them. So just leave a comment and I will get back to y'all, and I will see y'all on the next one. Bye.